Welcome back, travelers, to another episode of Legendary Lore with, of course, Joe. Say hi, Joe.
Hi, guys.
And me, Ricky. So basically, Joe is going to be stuck as a member of the Boss Watch until he figures out what exactly it is that I was thinking of when I made the contract with him.
Ricky was T.
It was not T. That was a good guess, though. So here we have Davriel, and he's just walking around with his cane, which also happens to have a sword inside of it, which is kind of important considering that he just got a spell that allows him to bring a weapon to his hand. So he has a cane sword, and he's just walking around, right? He's walking towards his carriage off in the distance, and they're discussing, yeah, those guys came from the Priory, and they came here, and they had wards on their minds to protect against specifically Davriel's abilities. So they had always intended to come after him. This wasn't like some happenstance kind of deal. They were specifically going to hunt him down.
Poor Davriel.
And Tassenda's worried because she's like, "You're not going to kill the prioress, are you?" And he's like, "Well, it really depends on what she responds to me with, because I have some things to say." And then they saw the carriage.
Oh no.
Behind it was Brerig. He was nailed to a nearby door. His head removed and placed beside a flickering lantern on the ground. And his mouth had been stuffed with garlic. Davriel's hand is clenched around the cane, like he doesn't show how he feels, but he does feel for that. And then this is what he says to her: "These are your good people, Miss Verlassen. Would that both gods above and demons below could protect me from good people. A man dubbed evil will take your purse, but the so-called good man will not be content until he has ripped out your very heart." And she's just kind of like, "That's messed up." And she thinks
I'll give you that one.
And she goes, "Brerig didn't deserve that." And then she thinks, he was a demon. He could have done any number of terrible things before he was killed.
She's trying to justify it, but she knows Brerig wouldn't do that. She spent time around Brerig.
That's the thing, though, is that Brerig is a demon, and he most definitely did do terrible, evil things because he's a demon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's subjective. Good and evil are subjective in this scenario, because this is from this perspective, you have Davriel trying his best to not do anything. Is that a good thing or a bad thing that he wants to be non-interventionist? Because we had Tamio in the previous one, and she was a good guy, but she was the exact same way, not the same motivation, but she was just trying to stay away from things.
We can't interfere. Why? Because that stuff's crazy. We can't interfere. Why? Because it's too much work.
So they get back in their carriage, and they're on their way, right, to the Priory. And Tascenda looks at Miss Highwater, and she goes, "So, Voluptera." And Davriel laughs at her.
I would too.
And Davriel goes, "Well, they named themselves." He goes, "You couldn't guess from Crunchnar, but she goes, I was young. I wanted to sound impressive." And Davriel's like, "Well, yeah, to a 16-year-old boy, yeah, that sounds really impressive." And she goes, "I was only 12 days old at the time. So, I mean, it's not like you could have done better." And Davriel's like, "Sulterix, Lush, sorry, Bosomhevia." And it's like, those are all great names. Thank you. Do you remember Brerig, the one we just talked about, who had his mouth stuffed with garlic and his head decapitated?
Yes.
That dandy little fella. Well, his deal was that he needed to answer the riddle before the 65th birthday. Because on the 65th birthday, that was when Davriel was going to have to give his soul to Crunchnar. Make sense?
Yes.
So Davriel's deal with Crunchnar is, as long as I haven't died by the time I hit 65, you can take my soul.
Davriel looks really good for 50.
First off, Joe, how do you think he got out of? How do you think he tricked Crunchnar?
I don't know really. There could be any number of ways.
He says as long as I haven't died by the time I hit 65. He had already died when he was younger.
Oh. Okay.
So
That's not something I would have seen coming.
Yeah, see, he automatically won. Crunchnar has no claim on his soul whatsoever, but he's his bodyguard for eternity. As they're reminiscing about these different contracts, we also get Brerig's specific one, which is, it's funny because it was a question, right? What am I thinking about right now? That's the riddle of the contract. And it's at this point that Davriel says what it was. Since Brerig's dead, he can tell it. It was a specific rock I saw once in Cabrelin, shaped like a gourd. That was it. That was the answer. The full
Simple,
thing,
but something he'd never figure out.
exactly. And it's because he said, instead of saying a rock in Cabrelin, which maybe he would have eventually got into, maybe, but no, a specific rock shaped like a gourd was his answer. Gourd. So we also find out that the reason that he chose Miss Highwater, the succubus, is because he had looked over her contracts with other people and loved the legal language. He fell in love with how well she can write. And so as a result, he was able to, he called her on and had her be his secretary, basically, because of that, because she can keep ledgers so well.
That's awesome.
It's also at this point that we find out that the majority of the demons that Davriel has employed had just come out of the Hell Vault. Like when the Hell Vault shattered, when Abzan was released a while back, a few years ago, Davriel had employed a lot of them because they were looking for new souls. And most of the time, they wouldn't, souls wouldn't join up. I mean, demons would not look for a soul that's already in a contract because of the fact that they would have to be competing with that other demon. So, and they don't like to share. But he's very good at the way he does things, so he was able to get it to go off
Very
like
persuasive.
that. Yes. Now, all that happened, Davriel still has no tea, and he's kind of just sitting there, right? Now, at this point, it's around 2 a.m. The reason it matters what time it is because remember, Tasenda will go blind when the sun rises. When it is daytime, she is blind. Even with Willia no longer there, Tasenda still has to deal with that. So they've now reached the priory, and you have to remember this is an entire place full of a bunch of holy people. So Davriel's like, okay, look, demon buddies, stay here. Don't worry about me. I'm gonna go in. It's gonna be great.
Got this cool cane sword. I'm good.
And it's weird because the entity then says, hey, look, it was wise of you not to do what you did with this and that, and his when in the past. And Davriel's like, wait, you're okay with that? He goes, yeah, it was wise because there were people stronger than you and they would have killed us both. And this is one of the few times the entity has said, yeah, it's good you didn't use me. So it kind of throws off Davriel, but he kind of just rolls with it. The entity reveals that he actually got Davriel to go to Innistrad. He put it in his head, hey, go to Innistrad. So that means that the entity has a reason for Davriel to be there, and it makes Davriel very uncomfortable. And he thinks maybe it's just lying. And while they're there, Davriel sees Rom. Yeah, and he goes, the man himself, Lord Davriel Greystone. I suppose we should have been expecting to see you tonight. And he goes, well, you guys kept sending hunters, so yeah, I had to come. He goes, I suppose that's true. And he goes, well, that's a worry for younger men. Feaster of men, he says, looking at Miss Highwater. And she says, oh, Rom, you're looking well. He goes, you always say that, miss. Well, you haven't changed a blink in 40 years. I know right well I've turned into an old scrap of leather left too long in the sun.
I love this guy.
Yeah. Rom is a really nice old man, but he's also seen some things. He dealt with the Eldrazi. He dealt with the angels, and he's an old man. He's the Rex. Like Rex from the Clone Wars. That's who this guy is, essentially. Rom notices Descenda is in the carriage, and he's like, I told you to stay in my cabin. And Davriel's like, well, I found her in my washing room with an eye for vengeance and a rusty implement in hand. She ruined one of my favorite shirts when she stabbed me. And Rom's like, did she now?
She's like, score one for the boys back home.
Well, that was right bravely done, Mr. Senda. I could have told you it'd be useless, but my, stabbing the man himself? The bog must be right proud of you. And she's like, thank you. And I love it. I love this character, and like you don't want to see anything bad happen to him. It's just such a kindly old man. Jacinda asks Rom, so do you know Miss Highwater? He goes, I tried for 10 years to destroy that demon. Got myself killed a half dozen times on the full quest. Well, I eventually learned never hunt a demon smarter than you are. Stick to the dumb ones. There are plenty of those to keep a hunter busy all his life. And so, like, you kind of just get like a real cool look at him. And she's like, I thought you hunted werewolves. And he goes, well, basically hunted everything. Anything that hunted men. And when it all settled down, I found I'd become an old man. Best years of my life spent knee deep in blood. Came here to try to escape that. Washed a little of it off. Spent some time hunting weeds instead. And so then Davriel asks him, what about Edwin? Do you know him? And he's like, oh, yeah, I know him. He's a very zealous boy. But you should go talk to the priors yourself. We're about to have this whole meeting with Edwin. We're going to do that in the next episode.
Sounds good. Thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to go ahead and catch you guys next time. We're going to confront Edwin. We're going to stick it to the man. We're going to dismantle the establishment.
Board by board.